Thanks, April. And thanks everybody for sticking around until the very last session. We're almost there, and thanks to you, April, for putting this all together. This has been a really fun weekend, and I'm glad you guys are all here. So I'm going to talk about how to pivot, and we kind of have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is this thing here. The spherical little protein with either RNA or DNA in it. I forget which, that has upended our lives here in the States and across the world. And, when I first was getting news about how we were going to be affected by this, I kind of got into preparedness mode because I have been through this before. In fact, it was with another circular shaped thing called Hurricane Andrew that came over South Florida in 1992. At the time, it was considered a Cat 4, but when we went through the winds of the storm, and it was later determined it was a strong Category 5 storm, and my family went through it. We had eye wall the entire time. So the eye was just only a mile south. So we had strong pounding winds throughout the storm. It was very scary, even for a kid like me who I had dreams to become a hurricane forecaster. And so there was a bit of excitement about the storm coming, but it didn't take long after the winds started to subside that our world had changed forever. And this is a shot that we had of our house after the storm. We didn't really take too many pictures. We did take some video after the storm because that's what was recommended for insurance purposes. But just to give you an idea, that's looks like that's either a cable line or a power. It's not a power line. I think it was the cable that was on power lines. And you see just trash everywhere and how stripped the roof was. We actually, even though this looks pretty bad, we fared out pretty well, but we were displaced for many months after the storm. So that's when we learned how to change in the middle of basically our routines getting upended by nature. But eventually we got back to our routine. I got back to sitting behind a computer, and either I was probably coding or playing King's Quest, or but I was definitely listening to Aphex Twin. This is definitely the 90s. So, eventually life did get back to normal, but, for a time we had to figure out what to do. So, I have a few friends that I asked about some advice as to what they were doing in the midst of all of this. And this is my friend Carlton Brown. He owns Occasional Occasions Catering and now Curbside Cuisines. And he is he's been around for like 20 years or 20 plus years, I believe. And he is like the master at social media. And part of the reason I've stayed connected with him is because I could see all the time when he's posting things. And he started talking about how he created the curbside service for his catering business to deliver meals to people who needed them, or who wanted to have home cooked meals at home. So I asked him about how he pivoted into doing delivery. So he looked at all the aspects of his business that could be replicated in the current environment that we're in. And this is the, post-COVID environment. And so he looked at the fact that he had a kitchen, he produced food. And so there was a need now, because people weren't going to restaurants, to do food delivery. So, and he wanted to stay in his wheelhouse because he felt like his reputation is important. So, meaning he had a van, so he could have just started doing deliveries for just about anything, right? Home deliveries, almost as if he was like Amazon. But he felt it was important to stay in food because his reputation is food. So he felt like it was important to stay in the wheelhouse. And he created a backup plan just in case this didn't work out. So he's already thinking a few steps ahead in case, for instance, people stop doing food delivery. So that's Carlton's story. Here's Angel Sarah. Angel Sarah is the manager of production services at Turner Sports. He's also one of my best friends. And he works at Turner Sports for all the different events. He's in charge of making sure that when Turner has a live event for the, see, now I'm thinking about sports events and I can't think of any for whatever reason, like Big Ten events, for all-star games, for all the things involving sports ball. He goes out there and he makes sure that that everything is connected, all the networks are connected, and everybody can go live without a hitch. And sometimes he's in cold weather like this, which for him, you know, poor thing, right? He's laying down network cables in the middle of a blizzard. So, you know, he's a pretty badass guy. And so right around March is their busy season. And he had a team basically ready to go to all these sporting events that were happening in the spring and leading into the summer. Well, all the events got canceled, as we know. And all of a sudden he is fully staffed up and really with nowhere to go. So this is how Angel pivoted. He acknowledged the seriousness of the situation and did not allow fear to take root. He recognized his role was to lead the team through this predicament, and he identified the changing needs of his customers. So what that meant was he realized that everyone at Turner Sports was no longer going to be traveling to all these different events. They were actually going to be working from home. And also their spouses would be working from home and their families would be at home as well for school. So he had his team set up to provide support, not only for the computers that were used by the employees, but actually the family computers, their mobile devices, their iPads. So he had his team basically set up to provide support at home since they couldn't go on the road. So he leveraged his IT skills in this new environment. So he used these IT skills that they already had. And even though they weren't going to be on the road and they weren't going to be setting up live network events, they were going to be working on computers that people had at home. So that's Angel. This is my mom. Her role is mother and wife. She is a retired school teacher. She and my parents both are school teachers, and she's from Cuba. And here's a picture of my mom in Cuba. After she's at a Sweet 15 party in Cuba and in a lot of Latin American countries. The girls have Sweet 15 parties versus Sweet 16, and there's these big elaborate events, and you see all the flowers there. And this was right after, or not long after, the revolution during the 1960s, early 1960s. And so my mom remarked that this is around the time that flower shops still had flowers and they were still privately owned. And this is before the government took over a lot of these businesses. And so a few years later, my mother, here she is, I forget which river this is, but she's at a riverbank, but she is at a forced labor camp. So my family wanted to leave Cuba. And so in order to leave, they made my mom go to work, and she worked in the fields for 3 years before she could leave Cuba. And so, it was a really difficult time to be forced into a situation like this. My mom shared that they slept on burlap sacks, basically, that formed cots. Showering was difficult. It was a hard life to work in the fields. And the only reprieve she had was like for one night, she got to sleep in her bed back home, but it was like a multi-hour journey. They wouldn't even cart them back home. They had to figure out a way to go back home, do laundry, sleep in their bed, and then come back to the fields. So here's how my mom pivoted in this kind of situation. So she leaned on her mother, who showed her compassion. So those times that she was able to stay at home, she leaned on my grandmother, her mother, for emotional support. She reached out to her friends who were still in Cuba. This was in the late 1960s, so there were many Cubans that had already left the island over to the United States and to other countries. So she was leaning on her friends who were still there, who were still in Cuba. And through her faith, she saw the light at the end of the tunnel. My mom shared with me that she really did want to die. She didn't want to endure this. There were times when she felt this way, but that she saw that the goal was to have the family leave Cuba and find freedom in the United States. And I'm very grateful for that, because if she didn't do that, then I wouldn't be here. So I also have like a personal pivot story. Here's a picture of me, December 24th, 2012. And this Christmas Eve. And as Cubans do, we celebrate Christmas. Usually our big celebrations on Christmas Eve. And I was about 180 pounds, and I was drinking like a fish. I was pretty much drinking daily and starting pretty early in the day. And not long after this photo was taken, I put myself through detox and went to the hospital and basically cleaned myself up. And on January 2nd, 2013, I decided that drugs and alcohol were no longer for me. Here I am in November of 2013, so about 11 months later, wearing the same shirt. I could actually button the top button now because I had a different type of neck. And I changed my life. I stopped drinking. I started working out, started going to the gym. In fact, this was at a party for a bunch of people that I met at the gym. So my life changed, and I felt like I was a happier person at this point too. So this is how I, during that time, pivoted. I accepted that I had a problem and I needed to change. I asked help from other people, and I started helping other people who were going through similar experience that I was going through. And I decided to take things one day at a time, because at that moment it was a whole new world for me, and I just needed to take just one day at a time, and whatever I needed to face, I just needed to face. It was the only things that I needed to face that day. So that's how I pivoted personally. So, and then if I start thinking back through time, my company Papaya Search, we do search marketing, and we've done some sort of internet work in some capacity. But if I think about my life as a web worker, knowledge worker, information worker, however you want to define it, I started my career at MCI WorldCom. And it was in the early 2000s, and we had dreams of like being this big company, and there were a lot of stock options. And I worked there through the largest bankruptcy ever at the time in corporate America. And so I had to make a change. And during this time, I had a little side hustle called Electrodish, which was named after my cat at the time. And we built websites. Basically, I was building Microsoft-based websites that connected to databases. So I wasn't even doing SEO. I was doing the web work that I knew from working at MCI WorldCom. And then eventually I got laid off. So I started Papaya Internet. And I was doing mostly e-commerce optimization. It was totally different than database work and working on like a corporate website. And I was also building affiliate websites. So I was in the affiliate marketing game for a long time. And eventually there were Google algorithmic changes. And so I even pivoted away from affiliate marketing and started getting into client services. And then I rebranded as Papaya Search last year with our focus on search and search marketing and search advertising and analytics. So even though I have been working on the web for 20 years, a lot of the work that I've done has changed over time. And, even being involved in, or being in the middle of a crisis like we're in, I can always look back and see that I have pivoted from time and time again. So how can you pivot for your own business? So taking some of the things that I talked about today, acceptance is the key. So, I know that for my business, I've lost a few clients over the past few weeks. And I accept that. And I accept that our economy is going through a huge disruption. And so being in that acceptance mode allows me to think about what I can do next and how I can move next. So some clients are gonna, we may lose some more clients over the next coming months, but there's also opportunities that I can pursue. So another thing we did after, right after the quarantine started to take place, was to check in with our clients. Checking in with our clients, with asking them what they need, what kind of help they need, how can we be of service, and also thinking about letting them know that we're still available and we're still here for them. So responding to the changing marketplace using your skills and abilities. I mean, much like Carlton, much like Angel, they use their skills that they already had, and maybe it wasn't their initial idea of what they were planning on doing for their business, or what they were initially trained to do, but both of them had the skills to be able to change and pivot, right? Much like in my experience with Papaya, I was building websites, and then eventually I was just more focused on doing SEO work and consulting work. So, and I'm still using all those skill sets that help me shape my experience. So, and I think Robert mentioned this too earlier about the horizontal and the vertical, and understanding, which way to pivot and move, because your skill sets can be applied to all kinds of different areas of business. Helping others, right? So once you have your things in check, you can help others and help those in need. There are a lot of people in need right now. We know that there's a lot of people that have been displaced from their jobs, or they're losing clients. That opens opportunities to help other people and to make ourselves available for them. And Nathan talked about this yesterday, about being able to help people, but not being the hero, because we all have to take care of ourselves too. It goes back to putting the oxygen mask on first before we help other people. But there are a lot of things that we can do, whether it's providing information or even just calling in and checking in with one another. A lot of times that just opens conversations to be able to help one another. Reach out to colleagues. I mean, we're not the only ones going through this, right? A lot of people are going through this, whether they're a business or they're an employee, right? So reaching out to colleagues and seeing what they're doing and seeing how we can help each other out, or even just getting some information on how they do things, can all help us help one another. And remembering that it doesn't feel like this right now, but this too shall pass. I mean, at one point we will be on the other side of this. It's not to say that this won't be a difficult road that we're on, and that things may change by the day, and it seems like they're changing by the day. But at one point we will get to the other side of it. After Hurricane Andrew, there were times when it didn't feel like, it was like, oh my gosh, my family we had this camper in front of our house that we basically lived in while we did work. And it was a tight squeeze for four of us, 2 teenage boys and my parents. And, it was difficult at times. And sometimes it didn't feel like we were ever going to get out of that little camper. But we did, we eventually did. And we eventually ended up back in our house, back to me typing on the computer. So this too shall pass. And we're all in this together. We're all here to support each other. And, even if we think about the WordPress community, it's very much a supportive environment. and even outside of the WordPress community, just there's a lot of us are helping each other out through this time. So thank you very much. My name is Bobby Kircher. I am the founder of Papaya Search, a search marketing agency. We specialize in SEO, search advertising, and analytics. And you can connect with me on all of these platforms. I'm at Bobby Kircher pretty much anywhere. And yeah, thanks for taking the time to listen to this, and thanks for coming out this weekend. This was a lot of fun.